VUMC Inpatient Medicine Initial Orientation Competency Checklist tutorial video. So, you'll notice that there are instructions for this checklist right here first thing. You'll be amazed at how many people fail to read these instructions and get confused, so we'll start off by reviewing them. The main points are, this checklist is a Joint Commission requirement, meaning that this is mandatory that you get it fully completed by the end of your orientation and submitted so that it can be placed in your employee file. For each competency listed in this checklist, the orientee must either complete a direct observation, a simulation, or a verbal review with their preceptor. This means that you either have to physically demonstrate the skill on a real patient, simulate the skill with your preceptor, or review the policy or Mosby's instructions for the skill in the event that you do not encounter the skill in the course of orientation and it's not possible to simulate it on the unit. That happens sometimes, and that's okay. So to sign off electronically on the skill, the VUMC competency team has determined that the preceptor must sign off with his or her VUNet ID and the date the skill was evaluated. It's not okay to do all of this on the last day of your orientation. It must be done as you go throughout orientation. The Joint Commission will see it as fraudulent if you just do it all in one day. As you go through this checklist, you will want to select the Save and Return Later button at the bottom. This will allow you to come back to the checklist at a later time and re-access it by signing in with your VUNet ID. So, to understand this checklist fully, you'll need to understand this, the Tiered Skills Acquisition Model, otherwise referred to as TSAM. How this works is instead of the typical orientation model where you take one patient the first week, two patients the second week, etc., we split it up a little bit differently. In the old way, the new nurse doesn't take care of the full patient load until they're almost finished with orientation. In many cases, this leaves new nurses unprepared to appropriately manage their time until several weeks after orientation is over, leaving them overwhelmed and clocking out late in order to play catch up. So with TSAM, the new nurse and their preceptor work together, taking care of all of the patients for the entirety of orientation. It is split up into skill levels rather than patients. So what does that mean? The new nurse will take on the full patient load along with their preceptor from the very beginning of orientation, but they'll only be responsible for the skills that correspond to their current level and below. So for instance, shown here, Level 1 is assessment and documentation. That means that the new nurse will be responsible for all of the assessment and then the documentation for each of the patients assigned to their preceptor for that shift. And the preceptor will take primary responsibility for all patient needs beyond that. So each level will be explained to you as you go through the checklist. So, moving along, next is simply the new hire information. Note the new hire VUNet ID box. If your VUNet ID is incorrect in this box for any reason, you won't be able to re-log in and save if you go down to Save and Return Later. So if you try and log in and can't, this is going to be the reason 9 times out of 10. All you have to do is contact your nursing education specialist and they'll fix this for you. So next is where the checklist begins to break into levels. As you can see, the expectations for the orientee are clearly laid out in the black header. Please refer back to these headers if you ever need a refresh on what each level actually means. There's something else I want to point out here, and that is the Select All That Apply capability of the checklist. My favorite one to highlight is this number 2. It states, navigates eStar to document patient assessment, vital signs, eyes and nose, blood glucose, telemetry monitoring, and CWA protocol. Well, during a regular shift, documenting assessments, vitals, eyes and nose, glucose, and tele are probably things you do all the time. But CWA, you might not encounter that in your whole entire orientation in some cases. So what would you do in this situation? This is where you select where the Select All That Apply feature comes in. Simply, you just select the Observation of Daily Work radio button when your preceptor feels like you've mastered the skill. And also make sure to verbally review what you do if you get a patient who is in alcohol withdrawal and you need to implement the CWA protocol. Then also select Verbal Review. You'll want your preceptor to sign off on the skills as they are completed, and mark the date to correspond with the latest date that you completed the skill on. So as you click each button, the preceptor VUNet ID and date evaluated sections will populate, and so they just simply type their VUNet ID in there, and hit the Today button, and then there you go. As you scroll through this checklist, you will see a few differences in format. First, the high-risk sections will appear once you get to level 2. So level 2 is high-risk medications. You will also notice that the verbal review in this section is no longer an option on these skills. This is because simply reviewing the policy or Mosby's skill sheet is it's not enough. For instance, many of our nurses go through orientation and never have a patient on a PCA, and then they get out on their own and feel totally panicked when like day 1 they have one. So if this happens to you, what I want you and your preceptor to do is physically get out a PCA pump and practice programming, actually look up PCA orders and charting in eStar so you have more of a baseline when it comes to integrate this into your practice. Then you can click simulated skill and you're good to go. You don't actually have to, go into a lab or anything like in nursing school. Just do a little bit more than the verbal review and you'll be good to go. So other things to note as you're going through it, there are no new skills in level 5. This is because this level is about putting together all of your skills you've gained in orientation thus far. Sometimes people get confused. Level 3 is way longer than all the other levels. That's because it's about safety and quality, one of our biggest and most important skill sets in the hospital. This is not a week per level checklist. So just because you have 6-ish weeks in orientation and there's 5 levels, don't get confused and think you have to be on level 3 just because you're on week 3 in orientation. Some new nurses will come right out of the gate in level 2 or 3, and some who got less clinical experience in their degree program might hang out at level 1 for more than 1 week. Everyone's unique, and the way the checklist is completed is unique as well. Go at your own pace. And that leads into this other fact is that the levels are flexible. Don't think just because you're in level 2 but you get the chance to administer TPN, which is a level 3 skill, you have to pass that up. The checklist is designed so that you can take the opportunity to do a lower volume skill as soon as it comes up, because that's something that can never be predicted. This is one of the good reasons. One of the reasons that it's a good idea to review the entire checklist early on in your orientation so you can be familiarized with what's included. Some people even print it, and that's fine. Just make sure that you're keeping track of the dates, that you're doing everything so that your preceptor can go back in and put it in. It's up to you. Just be really careful on that because you want to make sure that it's not looking like you're doing it all on one date, like I said. So after you complete all of the skills, make sure to finish the survey with these statements of validation, like the preceptor validates that the best of their knowledge, the orientee is ready to come off orientation, and that you validate to the best of your knowledge that you fulfill the requirements of orientation by completing the checklist. Make sure that you complete those. It also has your date. It has your preceptor full name and VUNet ID, and you can also add in more preceptors because inevitably you'll have more than one. And make sure that you click that yes button, and so you can populate these extra 3 names and put those in. And then there's also a signature. You just click this button, and it comes up for you to sign. So this is due no later than 1 week post-orientation, so make sure that you get this done and submitted so that we can put it in your file. And that is it. Thank you for watching this tutorial. If you have any questions regarding it or the orientation process in general, please reach out to your nursing education specialist or your CSL.